you, and you obliged to join us in the studio. So this is, not an opportunity. But how was your time in Ghana this time, B?
Look, it was great. I came for funerals
Oh,
and ended by really remembering that Ghana is my second country. So
wonderful.
I think that we have footprint in here.
That's very true.
So let's say it's a great moment.
It is for us, more importantly, because we get to learn, and especially, I mean, in preparing for this conversation, one of the things that we found out was, the work you had done at the World Bank in the past, and sometime in 2010, being the team leader for the Ghana Gateway Investment Project. Would you say that project was carried out satisfactorily as team lead?
Look, it was celebrated as such by both the bank and the government of Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And they even published together the results of that project.
Mm-hmm.
That could be summarized in terms of 305,000 jobs for Ghanaians, 10,600 jobs for expatriates. It also raised 12.6 billion US dollar in direct investment, FDI, in the span of 5 years. And it created an industrial base for Ghana, having the first ever multi-purpose industrial park in Africa that is not based only on processing end products here for 5% value addition, but also that is linked mainly to the national economy through a capillary of value chains and supply chains. So it helps structure the country and orientate its infrastructure policy.
No, as you were saying, I can umpe we now, but then it's evident on the numbers that it was successful, and as you say, gave us the foundation on which to even do more. Just before we started the conversation, and I was mentioning to Nanaya that the African Continental Free Trade Area and Agreement, ratified by 52 of the 53 countries, and is set to be the game changer. But there's also this, call it apprehension, that we may miss the opportunity if we don't do the right things. Industrialization is critical. In the 60s, specialized economic zones were very few. Today, there are more than 5,000 of them. And I'm not sure that's the end. There's still more coming. But the SEZs in of themselves may not be the panacea to the industrialization that Africa needs. And I may be fabulously wrong in that assertion, but in your estimation and with your experience, what are some of the things that we need to do, not just from the vertical being government, but also private sector and citizens to do to ensure that we really see the fruit that the FCFTA promises?
Very good, actually. I love the word panacea. It is not a panacea because we've been driven all the time by institutional approach to development, and like if everything had to trickle down. People used to think that once you have rules, regulation, and a framework, and some civil servants that are mainly, in many cases, careerist bureaucrats, everything gonna flow. That's not the case. You have to make things happen, because this is a prerequisite that is very important. But it is a vehicle, a platform that you're going to use to channel development, which means we have to design our own prospects and path to development based on the transformation of our resources in Africa. And I think Ghana is one of the best qualified economy to be turned around that direction. Why? Because in terms of cultural heritage and historical heritage, you've always got leaders that love their country and that try to ground the development of the country in the culture of the country, the resources in the country, and build the capacity to do so accordingly. Here, for instance, we have demonstrated with the Ghana Trade and Investment Gateway that we have in Ghana our own concept of special economic zone. Because people talk about special economic zone, but when it is special all the time, that means there is nothing special. Because when you say special, you need to see what is the specificity. Sorry, I'm a French. Huh?
Okay.
So you have to show what makes it special. What would make it special in the case of Ghana and Africa as a whole? It is because you should build those special economic zone on competitiveness platform and infrastructure policy, both institutional and physical, that would support the immediate emergent and legibility of economic opportunities that are ready to grab by private sector. So when you tailor make this type of approach, you know where you are heading to. You know which type of infrastructure policy, of course, energy policy, what type of education policy, vocational training. And when you prioritize your investment, you will put your mouth where your money is. And this is going to give you a clear orientation on how you're going to shape your policy. The rest would be the type of container you need to carry this content. And most oftentimes, people are talking about the container before putting the content in it. This is like if you want to pack water with some kind of paper. You know what's going to happen.
That's right.
Yeah, very interesting that you raise a model there, and this is something in which you have great expertise, that you design the whole industrial value chain, and you talk there of the need for, if you like, a localized model of African industrial development grounded in the resources that we'd have. People would argue that, okay, so that kind of mirrors what the Asian tigers did, maybe, the takeoff of the Far East, but it's not what Europe did, the original Industrial Revolution. That was predicated on a kind of model of globalization where you had the raw materials coming in from, whether it's cotton in England or tea, to tea makers in whichever corner of Europe you care to think of. How does Africa within the AFCFTA really begin to target and narrow down those areas of competitive advantage? Because each of us, it's like Ghana being next door to Cote d'Ivoire. We both think we can do cocoa. Should one of us have competitive advantage there when it comes to the industrialization processes?
I think I'm the one to learn here. I'm very impressed by the choice of word. You didn't use the word comparative advantage. You say competitive advantage. The problem Africa has been encountering since its independence is that it has not been able to transform its comparative advantage into competitive advantage. Because competitiveness and inclusive growth are cluster issues. And we have the potential to develop integrated clusters, not the way China has done it. Give you an example. What made actually China benefit from globalization? This is the Washington Consensus that has manufactured poverty in Africa. Because in 1980, when our countries was institutionally indebted, mainly with the Bretton Woods institution and the major shareholders of the Bretton Woods institution, it was a gateway to blackmail African government and direct their own policy and confine them into being appendices for supply of raw materials they don't control. And remember, the Bretton Woods institutions themselves, they were created in 1944 with the objective of ensuring equal access by their owners, by their shareholders, to the resources they need to continue their development. Most of these resources are in Africa, were in Africa, and are still in Africa. But some of them was fighting against each other because some had colonies, meaning slaves, and access to raw material. Others didn't have it. This is how originated the First World War and the Second too. And in order to prevent war from happening again, they have decided to create these institutions. So at that time, we were colonized. When we become independent, some great African figure like Kwame Nkrumah, like Gamal Abdel Nasser, like Modibo Keita, tried to internalize and indigenize development, which means they would like to go into areas of economic integration, spatial integration based on the transformation of our resources. You know what happened to them. This is the reason why these institutions are not interested in industrialization, because if they are interested in industrialization, that means African going to compete with their masters, with their owners on African resources. And this is why when we were indebted, imprudently indebted, we were forced to macroeconomic trickle-down policies. And our government are under perfusion just to receive money. They can pay their civil servant, their army, and everything. And it has been going for 40 years. Now, what happened with China? When they liberalize and say that if we don't go through structural adjustment and stabilization, they will not get money for our governments. So they made it like if government is the only one to do development, which is false. And second thing, we need to subscribe to WTO rules and arrangement and discipline in order to let these guys continue to modelize and perpetuate their approach to making Africa a market and a provider of raw material. So with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, they implemented it. So, but then they didn't see Deng Xiaoping coming. And Deng Xiaoping realized that with the liberalization of and internationalization of capital flows, China could attract investment. So these are those people who wanted to slave them to manufacture cheap and ship it back and sell it that made China. In the fact, they created their special economic zone with competitiveness platform, trained their people, and finally, the masters became the slave. And this has been evidenced by the COVID, because every type of value chain has been decentralized to China and some of the dragons, Asian dragons and everything. So this is why their model is reflective of the historical conditions that were going on. Now, our situation have changed. I was telling yesterday a friend of mine that you know very well, that even our political model now will change because of the digitalized information. African youth, they know that they are begging sitting on the midst of plenty. They want growth, they want prosperity. And growth and prosperities are driven by mass production, that is industrialization. You can make any type of political arrangement you want. You can go campaign and everything, but you have to make people promise they can believe in. And this is possible, and particularly in the case of Ghana, where we have developed our own model.
I'm so excited that you made reference to the Chinese model because it's one that's often celebrated. I mean, China has its, I think, 12 or so specialized economic zones that they're using for world dominance. The raw materials come from this part of the world. You also talked about the liberalization that allowed financing to come in. One of the biggest hurdles for Africa has been mobilizing the financing to truly industrialize. Is it truly a hurdle, or is a monster we created in our head?
Look, you have a living example. That is what we did through the Ghana Trade and Investment Gateway. When I inherited that moribund project, everybody was asking me to close it, not to ruin my reputation of an entrepreneur and an economist. But on the 50 million that the World Bank had put through IDA, on this project, 15 million has already been spent on consultancies to no avail. So I was left with 35 million. But this is with the 35 million combined with other activities that we raised 12.6 billion direct investment. Okay. Which means it is possible to have innovative financing systems that are dictated by the reality on the ground. Because as the military say, this is the reality that defines the strategy. And I can tell you here, with the 6 special economic zone, the government of Ghana is embarking in. If we had time, I could tell you what would be the type of growth poles that could be created through that, and how we can irrigate the whole country with a capillarity of value chains and orientate the policy. And I guarantee you, with the type of investor conference that we will make ad hoc, we will get people to float investment here. Wow. We don't need any real institution, because if somebody lends you glasses or your eyes, you have to look at the direction he dictates you to look.
That's profound, and I would really love to explore the growth pose. I mean, you mentioned we have 6 special economic zones coming up. On paper, there's a great ideas. We often say in Ghana that we have some of the best ideas when it comes to policy and development models. But in terms of growth poles, where would you think that we can start seeing, all things being equal, the real returns?
Look, you have to, what they call low-hanging fruits is what I call what you can do in an immediate term. For instance, here you have a lot of potentials in some underexploited production lines. So we have then to focus our attention. Whenever you go, you say in Kumasi, for instance, these are the type of resource mapping that you have. The question would be, how are you going to get these dormant and underexploited line of products to transform them into value chain by ways of aligning in competitiveness platform, institutional platform, and everything, and policies to highlight near-term investment opportunities, then syndicate financing. It can be done very quickly. It is like if you operate as an entrepreneur, but an institutional entrepreneur. So you can, for me, I have no problem. You can take me to Takoradi and tell me, Pap, what do you think, how do we structure here the special economic zone, around which type of value chains and everything, and we'll make it done. Because once you have the practice, and once you have the vision, and you are used to be implementing your strategy, it can be rather quick. And I believe in this country it is very urgent, because we have seen the setback we've got by going back to IMF to rescue. But this rescue cannot be permanent. We need to make it useless in the future. It will not be with words, it will be with action. And we have the means of action.
Action is certainly going to be required if we're going to turn our comparative advantage into competitive advantage. If the AFCFTA is to be successful, would you agree that we need to relook at the collective competitive or comparative advantage and work to turn them into competitive advantage? Can we have specialized economic zones across the continent where 2-3 countries within the AFCFTA, for example, can leverage some form of advantage? And I see there's a glint in your eye, that gives us the necessary impetus to be able to industrialize far more rapidly than if, say, Ghana was going to try and do its own SEZs and Cote d'Ivoire did its own thing, and Nigeria and Senegal and Mali and maybe Equatorial Guinea did their own thing.
Look, my father have taught me never to sit down. He told me, work. If you don't go the right direction, you change course while you work. That is important. Motionlessness is not good. Number 2, you cannot wait for all conditions to be met to start, because everything is urgent in Africa and also in Ghana, we are talking about. What you are talking about is actually what you would like to see happen after the processes are completed. See Ghana doing this, that. That happens when you distribute growth potentials based on the comparative advantage of the country. You cannot go and say, okay, I'm going to make automotive, you're going to make the tire. No. If you see the country has a potential in rubber, as I said, it's a dormant line of production. You design a strategy, a policy that will develop value addition out of it. And when you do it in the competitive manner, then if Togo wants to do vehicle assembly, they know where to get the rubber. So you can think along those lines in the term of a grape. You see what a grape?
Mm-hmm.
You pull, the grapes are linked among themselves.
That's right.
So you create some poles, what I call multipolar growth centers.
Okay.
The concept, I developed it here in Ghana, and I would like our special economic zone to be the cradle and the epicenter of multipolar growth centers that are connected by national and regional value chains. And this is how you're going to get countries to end by specializing. If you say you want to integrate Africa, you're just going to go and make some conferences, some events, what I call events to celebrate poverty. You have to have people who have the capacity to analyze the dynamics on the ground, the untapped potential, and have an idea of what type of policy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of programs of all sorts that will trigger appetite for people to come and invest in the form of what I call strategic public-private partnerships on value chains.
Wow.
This is what you have to do. And then you will distribute complementarities, structural complementarities among the economies. Even in Ghana here, you can integrate the whole economic space based on that model.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have the epicenter of growth poles that will polarize activities, but will also diffuse opportunities within their environment. That's the way it works. Doing so, you will realize that even in Switzerland, where you are paying negative interest when you have $10 million in your bank, they will rush to come and invest in Ghana. I believe in this marriage of interest, of reason. You can go to before the mayor and swear that you're going to be loyal to me. But I want your loyalty to be driven by your own interest.
It's 22 minutes past 9. This is the Assassi Breakfast Show, and we're having a conversation with economist, industrial development expert, Papa Demba Thiam, sharing some mind-blowing yet pragmatic and practical ideas on how we can truly industrialize.
Yes, Papa Demba Thiam, you've also written, one of the things you've written about in relation to industrializing or localizing the industrial model is about the need for economists to adopt the mindset of Africa in their approach to development. And forgive me if I got your meaning wrong, because my French is very rusty, but you were writing about the need to adopt the psychological, sociological approach, the psychosocial approach of poverty by economists to the way they think, because you explained that as a hands-on entrepreneur in your own right, you are a businessman in your own right. You've come on a visit to Africa, you're there taking care of business, and every day you get up in the morning and there's a pile of problems from yesterday to solve before you even begin to think about what you want to do next. And it's on the level of people seeming to undo the work that you have already done. Slightly controversial idea to sell to Africa, is it not?
You'll be surprised if you go on where I post it, you will see thousands and thousands of people who are reading it. And I can tell you, even where I stay, I got many foreign companies who want me to advise them to come to Africa because they want to be in osmosis with these things. Let me tell you one thing. This thing, I first learned about it when I was in fish processing. I had a company called Atedis International, a value chain development company in Switzerland, where we created 29 value chains. And some of our brands are still on the Swiss supermarkets and has disseminated around. When I decided as a professor, because I developed the interface strategies, which is actually the strategy to develop value chains. Right? So most people are talking about value chain, they don't even know how you do it.
This is the thing you wrote a book about in 1991.
Exactly, which you see is a bestseller. I think it sells $80.
It's going like hotcakes on Amazon still, I think. Yes, absolutely.
That doesn't make me rich, I can tell you.
Oh, really?
But what I realized at that time is that the failure of Western enterprise in Africa was based on the fact that they didn't factor in cultural differences. I was trying to get a Senegalese fish processing company to work along the Swiss norms.
Because you now live in Switzerland, of course,
Yeah.
you're based in Neuchâtel.
I'm back.
Ah,
Yeah, I left 26 years to do international touring, and I went back in 2017 to be free to develop, to do industrial development in Africa, free of any institutional influence. So what I realized at that time is that when you come to the company, all rules, procedures, and everything are abided. People respect them, at least on face value. They were wearing masks. They were wearing gloves. You see the production line, everything seemed normal. So, as somebody who has an Swiss entrepreneurial training, I say everything is fine. But when my cargo arrived, it is rejected because there were a lot of microbes, any type of thing I cannot tell on the radio.
Wow.
Same as some people can even go to the bathroom. Normally, you think they wash their hand, but actually they spread the stuff on it. And I was surprised because this was not consistent with the platform of processing that we have there. So then I started to come close to the guys, be their friends. I didn't remove my tie because otherwise they would say it's a petit bourgeois who doesn't want to get his shoes spoiled. I cannot tell you how many shoes I have lost in these things. And when they gained acquaintance with me, they told me, who you work for? I say, Atedis. Say, oh, your bosses are happy. I say, I am the boss. Oh, you are? I say, so you should. I say, I'm ashamed of you. Say, why? I say, because you are sabotaging the products. And then they say, okay, let's meet in your hotel. So they come to my hotel and tell me, look, you respect us, but in this company, this is apartheid. Whiteys are at first floor, we are at ground floor, they don't respect us, they can bring even a young man, 26 years old, we are 50, and the guy is mistreating us when we are here. So then I realized there was an issue of the what I call transversality of culture. In Ghana, for instance, I've been to your funerals. I've seen the rites. Everybody comply with that. The same people who have the same type of relationship when they are outside a European company, the minute they cross the door they become different individuals with different rules, different culture. So these individuals are in complete stress all the time and contradiction. So the same person is different whether he is operating inside the company or outside the company. And the Westerners has never factored it in. They just thought that Africans were not mature and ready for industry. So this is the type of thing we reversed. I reported to the general who was at that time, he used to be general in our army, even commander-in-chief, who was the head of the company. When I told him that, he said, will you help me turn it around? I said, yes. So we designed an enterprise culture which was in congruence, in coherence, and relevance with our own culture. But this is what the Chinese has meant. Chinese, they run their enterprises throughout Chinese culture. Japanese, the same. Even in Ghana here, in the informal sector, you have your own operation rule. There is no shock. That means that we need to have our own enterprise culture. So if you don't factor in this social, how do you call it again? I even forgot the word I used that you remind me.
Was it
Psychosociology of poverty. And the psychosociology of poverty becomes a reality over the last 40 years. People are so used to be poor that they have grown being poor that they cannot even miss what is not poverty. So they can blast their perspective. You can tell them in 3 days We work together. I'm going to get you this. You just be patient. He can blow it out if you give him 10 cities he needs right now. So people are on the constant survival mode. This is why don't believe in promises of development. And I witness it staying in my own. I'm making a building in Senegal, which I want. I want a challenge to make it normed as Swiss with Swiss standards.
Okay.
And with 2 months, I have been interacting them. Now, if I show you pictures, you will be amazed. I just posted on my WhatsApp. They are doing it like the Italian and the Swiss without me being in Senegal. So this is the whole type of a training, real-time training, with respect, dignity. Take them as they are and live with them. So when you win their heart and you make promises, they see they can believe in, you demonstrate it. It took 2.5 months for me to get these guys. I can import them to Ghana and make any type of work you want.
That would be
Wow.
wonderful.
Big market. Yeah.
You know, the saying that people buy people first is evident in the example that you just shared. If you look across, even before the African Union or the AFCFTA, we've got ECOWAS, we've got SADC, you've got the East African Economic Community. Let's focus on West Africa, which is where we're all from. How do we ensure that the colonial arrangements that undergird our independence and our economies does not become a further stumbling block to the unity or the momentum that a truly harmonized economic bloc can bring to us? I mean, you got the French on one side, and you got the English on one side across West Africa. I know of examples of some francophone countries beginning to look at collaborating and look away from France, for example. Is this in the interest of Africa to keep doing, and how do we become successful at achieving these?
Look, personally, I don't believe in building alliances against anybody. I build alliances for myself and for my people or people with whom we have common interest. I think, and this is what I try to sensibilize people. So don't focus your energy by going against somebody, but focus your energy by building your own interest. Affirm your orientation, and the other people will respect you. The problem we have is that we have never been the master of our own policy. Even when we deal with donors, we'll get the donors to tell us what to do. They're going to bring their own consultant. They put their money there and they use their consultant. All these blocks, look at the African Union. It's a replica of the European Union. That's a shame. And when African Union leaders are meeting European leaders, these are the Europeans that pay their tickets. Isn't it a shame?
It is indeed.
So when you want to say, okay, you want to be sovereign, you want Ghana beyond aid, will you go and get the Brits to finance your own thinking and pay consultants for you? No, you need to have your own seed money that makes you independent to develop strategies. When you put on the table, people will rush to work on it. And that is the type of a huge structural missing link that has been governing our activities. So Bretton Woods institutions belong to us too. But as long as you don't go with them and say, you change paradigm in terms of relationship with Africa, we will no longer accept that you are organized to distribute our wealth among yourself. We are not interested. If this is a matter of 10 million, you keep it. I remember when I was a young entrepreneur, President Obasanjo met me at the Grand Hotel Paris when he realized I was developing this thing. He told me, Pap, IMF, World Bank wants to lend us 100 million. 100 million USD. And To get this 100 million, they are dictating our policies. Me, I'm a farmer and a soldier. This doesn't sound reasonable to me. I say, President, how many inhabitants you have in Nigeria? He say at that time 110 million. I say, so if every Nigerian give you $1, you have your 110 million, and you get rid of these guys. He jumped on me and he grabbed me, and this is how he continue to say I'm his son or something like that. So there are things that are evident. You have resources. We can raise finance through resources. It's kind of a model of partnership. I'm not going to disclose it here otherwise because I wouldn't be useful to this country anymore.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And it's a pretty good time for us to also bring the curtain down on this engagement with you, Papa Demba Thiam. It's been wonderful talking to you. I get the sense that we've not even scratched the surface of what we could glean from him, Nanaya.
Oh, absolutely. I hope we're going to continue this conversation.
I have a feeling he's coming back soon. Well, it's great talking to you. We're going to take a break now. And when we come back, well, guess what? We're still talking about trade, right? We'll be talking to the CEO of the Ghana Trade Fair Authority. There's some interesting stuff happening over there. And all of that is geared towards ensuring that we're giving businesses the sound footing they need to grow.